So our first session today, or this afternoon, is called Beyond 2022, Making Ireland's Records Digitally Accessible. And this will be delivered by Elizabeth Biggs and Sarah Hendriks. Sarah and Elizabeth are research fellows based at the National Archives working on this project. The Beyond 2022 project is virtually reconstructing 7 centuries of Irish records that were lost with the destruction of the Public Record Office of Ireland in 1922. And they'll be discussing the technologies, collaborations, and archival approaches that underlie the reconstruction. So if I'll hand over now to Sarah and Elizabeth, thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Sarah Hendriks, and along with my colleague Elizabeth Biggs, as Emma Jane has said, we'll be discussing the processes and techniques of our roles with the Beyond 2022 project.
And to start with, we've got a short video clip which introduces the background and gives us that overview of some of the things we're doing. So if I just get that started.
Dublin, June 30th, 1922. Day 3 of the Battle of the Four Courts, the opening engagement of the Irish Civil War. Shortly after noon, the city is shaken by a huge explosion. After the blast, fire takes hold and plumes of white smoke are seen billowing from an arcade of tall windows in a corner of the Four Courts complex. This is the Record Treasury of Ireland's Public Record Office. Irish history, dating back over 700 years, is on fire. Inside the Record Treasury, the intense heat melts the high ironwork galleries and shelving, casting paper and parchment records into the flames below. Miraculously, one part of the building survives almost intact, except for a blast hole in the side wall. The Record House, and at its heart, the handsome search room, where researchers pored over historical documents, had escaped the worst of the damage. Now supported by the Government of Ireland, the Beyond 2022 project is reconstructing the search room in virtual reality. Here, readers in 1922 conducted their research beneath the natural light of a beautiful glazed ceiling. And for the first time in a century, we can reopen the double doors that led to the Record Treasury, passing through the fire break which stopped the blaze spreading to the front of the building. On the centenary of the fire, 4 steps will take you on your journey through Ireland's Virtual Record Treasury. Explore, locate, connect, discover. Entering through the Record House, you can admire its elegant staircase before passing into the search room where your discoveries begin. From here, you can search the archive and travel to the very place in the lofty galleries of the Treasury where the records destroyed in 1922 have been reassembled from surviving copies and transcripts located in archives across Ireland and around the world. Now, next-generation technology enables you to visualize the whole archive and make connections in ways that were unimaginable a century ago. Returning to the search room, you can discover more about the people, places, and topics contained in the documents. Beyond 2022, unlocking the story of Ireland and its peoples across 7 centuries, and reopening a lost archive to new generations with new questions. Dublin, June 30th.
Sarah?
Fantastic. Thanks, Elizabeth. That great video was made by some of our partners, NoHo in Dublin. And as you can imagine, having seen that, the process of identifying, locating, and making accessible material that can replace that lost from the Four Courts blaze is complex. My role in the Beyond 2022 project is as the UK Archival Discovery Fellow. I'm based at the National Archives in Kew, and my job is to find replacement material to include in the Virtual Record Treasury. I work mostly with early modern records from around 1500 to 1800. This role is part of archival discovery, one of the core strands of the Beyond 2022 project, and its work is at the heart of creating a database from which the Virtual Record Treasury shelves can be restocked. And whilst a big part of my role is in locating and enhancing records known to be of relevance to the PROI, Public Record Office of Ireland's lost collections, like the State Papers Ireland series at TNA and the CART papers at the Bodleian Library, Oxford, my role also involves discovery of the unknown. A big challenge of archival discovery is working out what material was originally included in the PROI's collections and in creating a full inventory of loss and survival. Thankfully, we're aided in this by the survival of a guide to the Public Record Office written in 1919 by the then Deputy Keeper of the Public Records, Herbert Wood. This handbook provides an overview of everything that was held in the repository at that time, ranging from 13th century receipt rolls through to 19th century guild records and everything in between. And whilst it's incredibly useful, the handbook is somewhat short of specific detail, as you may be able to tell from some of the entries on this slide. And it can be difficult to work out just what is comprised of some of these entries, such as this correspondence miscellaneous civil. That's about as much as we get. Fortunately, some colleagues discovered and have now digitized a series of increment books. These are the written registers that recorded every item that was lodged in the PROI and details of exactly where in the building they were stored, down to particular shelf numbers. Together, Wood's Guide and the increment books provide an almost complete picture of everything that was stored and lost from the PROI. And this enables us to not only identify relevant material, but also to recreate an inventory of loss and survival and place items back on shelves as they would have been stored 100 years ago.
In addition to the kind of work Sarah's doing of looking at big collections, there are also known particularly rich collections of documents that are being given more extensive treatment. We call those the gold seams, where we can reconstruct what was in the PROI down to item level, and we can provide a full edition in addition to the digitized images. My work is on one of those gold seams, which is drawn from one of the largest collections of medieval Irish documents to survive, the medieval exchequer rolls, now at the National Archives UK. There were about 400 or so original documents that were written in Dublin for the English administration in Ireland between around 1270 and 1446, which ended up in the collections of the English government in London due to a series of financial scandals in the late 13th century. These records record the payments made into and out of the Treasury in Dublin and some of the supporting documentation that authenticated those payments. At the bottom of my screen, you can see a picture of a selection of those documents, both the parchment rolls recording the payments and then the slips of parchment that were brought to authenticate them. Additionally, there were also summary accounts that were made in Westminster of the Irish accounts once they had been audited, which can be used to supplement the gaps in the record where needed. Now, these records are relatively well known, but they haven't always been made fully available. They are in cramped bureaucratic Latin, and it's not always clear what you're going to find when you open any particular roll. H.S. Sweetman produced a partial calendar in the late 19th century as part of his wider calendar of Irish material at TNA up to only 1307. He stopped at that point. And excitingly, Philomena Connolly edited the issue rolls, which were the rolls recording payments made out of the Exchequer in 1998 for the Irish Manuscripts Commission. So we know that some of this stuff has been at least partially published. The medieval Exchequer gold seam, therefore, is focusing on the receipt rolls, the records of payments that were received in Dublin. And the receipt rolls tell us lots about the social, political, and economic life of late medieval Ireland, everything from tax payments to fines for crimes such as shortchanging customers and more. We really are looking forward to having a full edition of this material and seeing what it will enable researchers and the public to do when you've got both Connolly's issue rolls and the receipt rolls side by side.
So the process of turning these archival finds into items on a virtual shelf that anybody can access utilizes many exciting digital techniques And in this, we're aided by the expertise of colleagues in the Trinity College Dublin Adapt Centre, a world-leading research centre for AI-driven digital content technology. At the centre of the project is a specially constructed database formulated around the ISADG standards of archival description. These enable us to create metadata for those items included in the treasury. It builds on the work done by home repositories and allows us to add extra details, especially about the scope and content and the archival history of documents uncovered in our research. A core functionality of the database is that it enables us to digitally link items to both the increment books and Wood's Guide, thus bridging the gap between their home repositories and their original places within the PROI.
The database is made up of two structures. The inventory of loss on the left hand of the screen and the inventory of survival, where the text has gotten a bit garbled, on the right hand of the screen. First, we used Wood's Guide to call what we call the inventory of loss, the archival description, according to those standards, of everything that was in the building in 1922. That's the sad bit. But the exciting thing is on the other side of the screen, the inventory of survival. This is where we put in the metadata about items that are in libraries and repositories around the world and tell you how those items relate to what was lost. As you can see here on the left, Wood's Guide has given us the series PROI-E, Exchequer, the Court of, and its sub-series of the fee side, the equity side, and the revenue side. So that's our description of what was lost. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the repository information for TNA E101, which is a set of Irish medieval documents that I'm editing along with Lynn Cogallan. I can link those two things together. So I can say that an item from E101, say E101 231, is a replacement for items that would have been in PROI E3, the revenue side of the Exchequer, and I can choose where I link them. I can also tell the database what kind of link there is between the lost series and the item that's now, as it happens, in TNA's collections. The E101s are duplicates of material that was originally created in Dublin, but they never would have been anywhere near the PROI because they've been in the English collections since pretty much since they were created. So they're indirect replacements. They're duplicates and they're indirect replacements. If we had a 19th century copy of Irish medieval documents in Dublin, we can note them as transcripts and direct replacements of material that was in the PRI before 1922, so which gives us a huge amount of precision and flexibility in how we both determine what to link to what and how we describe the links that we're creating.
So as the video at the beginning of our presentation showed, Beyond 2022 will create a virtual record treasury that users will be able to explore, discovering items from across the collection and tracing their connections to other items and collections across the repository. This immersive experience will allow users to discover and examine Irish records in a new way. And in anticipation of the full launch of the Virtual Record Treasury in June 2022, on the centenary of the destruction of the Four Courts, a preview of the Treasury with a doll's house view of the record bays showcasing selected documents is now available for you to explore on the PROI Treasures page of the Beyond 2022 website. And we'd encourage you to go there and have a play and see what you think of this first attempt ahead of next year's full launch.
As I mentioned earlier, the Medieval Exchequer Gold theme is focusing on the receipt rolls. We're going to be producing a digital edition, which will be freely available on the web next year as part of that centenary, which we hope will be as useful to researchers as Connolly's issue rolls has already been. To do this, we're using the standard of TAI XML. So I'm just going to quickly walk you through the process we're using to getting from document to text searchable computer searchable text. This is a TNA document. It's one of the supporting documents that were brought to London from Dublin in the 15th century. As you can see, the text of the document is in Latin, so we start by translating it. Here, because so much of it is formulaic, we've cut out the formulae, such as the starting clause, Henry by the grace of God, King of England, and so on. We just write Henry V. But then we use this is where gets more interesting. We then use TEI to mark up the kind of information that people want to search. People, places, offices, the amounts of money that have been mentioned in the document. These will then feed into and be linked to the linked data knowledge graph, which I'll explain in a moment. By both translating and marking up the text, we'll make it much easier for people to use the information and for the computer to search it. There's probably, to give you a sense of the scale we're working with, there's probably about 1 million entries of people, places, and offices in the gold seam. And the reason we're using TEI is we want people to be actually able to search them. Of course, you really don't want to have to look at the raw TEI, and so we export it to look like the top photo there. The data is all there if you want it. You can also read the text easily. And if you want to see an example of what we've been doing, there's a receipt roll from the late 13th century that's just been added to the project website, where you can see both the image and the translation together. And over the next year, we'll be adding more.
Another piece of software beyond 2022 is utilizing to make the virtual treasury records more accessible is Transcribus. This software enables machine-based transcription of original handwritten documents. We can upload images and scans of the original handwritten material, and Transcribus will read it automatically. And these transcriptions make reading original texts far easier and far more accessible than ever before. They negate the need for users of the virtual treasury to have advanced paleographical skills, and when combined with text search capability, mean that documents of many hundreds of pages are readable and searchable quickly and easily by everyone. And 2 days ago, it's very exciting, to mark the 99th anniversary of the Four Courts Blaze, Beyond 2022 launched a new handwriting model for the Transcribus platform that has shown great success for documents written in a range of handwriting styles from across the early modern period. This model is freely accessible through Transcribus and Transcribus Lite and is available for anyone to use with their own projects. So we encourage you to head over to their website and have a go.
And once we have computer searchable text relating to the items that we're putting back into the virtual treasury, we then need to make that text easy to find, need to make it easy to search these documents to find the information that you want. To do this, Beyond 2022 is developing another graph for Irish history to use the power of linked data. I'm only going to give the quickest of introductions to what we're doing because Dr. Lynn Cogallan on the Gold Seam and Dr. Fabrizio Orlandi of the ADAPT Centre are the ones who are doing this work. So I'm talking about what they've been doing. By entering information into a structured graph schema, we can start to make links across record types and across repositories, or rather the computer can do it for us. Here on the screen on the left, you have James Audley, one of the medieval justiciars of Ireland, the chief governors of the English administration. By linking him to the various offices he held, Justiciar of Ireland, Justice of Chester, and so on, we can then look at all the other people who also held those offices and start to see connections there. Similarly, we can also map things. So on the right, we've mapped where various offices occur. And it's early days yet, but you can start to see the power of linking things together. Again, here you can, in a more complicated example, you can start seeing the many connections between individuals such as John Wogan and Alexander Bickner, both later major officials in the English lordship. But the knowledge graph also lets us bring together different record sources. We're very grateful to the Dictionary of Irish Biography at the Royal Irish Academy, which has given us access to their data, which we can use to enrich the existing graph information that we have and make new connections. For example, the Dictionary of Irish Biography has tagged their data with categories such as politics, which we haven't been using so far, but which we can now use to search the graph. And so by linking together our own work and existing data sets, we can create a really powerful way to search across all of the exciting material that we're going to include within the virtual treasury for next year.
So although I'm based at the National Archives, archival discovery research is not restricted to this one repository. And we have colleagues who are carrying out this work in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and extending into North America. My work has also located material in other key repositories across the UK, including the Bodleian Library in Oxford, Cambridge University Library, and the British Library. And across the project, Archival Discovery has located replacement items from around the world. And a full list is here on the screen now. And it includes repositories from the United States. We've recently found material in Australia, and the project currently has over 50 participating institutions, with more being added every week.
And this has been a very quick introduction of the methods and technologies we're using to recreate Ireland's lost archives in digital format ahead of next year's centenary. And we really couldn't do it without the core partners, the National Archives UK, the National Archives of Ireland, the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, PRONI, Trinity College Dublin, and the Irish Manuscripts Commission, who have all generously shared their holdings with us. And if you'd like to find out more about what we've been doing, the project website is beyond2022.ie, and it's on the screen there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Elizabeth. It's absolutely fascinating. I knew before you gave your talk that it would be a culturally interesting project. I hadn't quite realised, and perhaps I should have done, quite how kind of technologically interesting it is as well. It's got so many facets, so thank you. Please feel free to ask any questions if you have any of Sarah and Elizabeth. I will kick off with a couple. Sarah, I'm really interested to see you had that whole list of organisations across the world that are involved. How do you go about sort of searching for Irish material, you know, in places beyond the UK? It must be a bit like looking for a needle in a haystack. Can you tell us a bit about that?
It really can be. I think I said before somewhere that, you know, you do a search in a repositories catalogue, and you can search for something like Ireland, you'll add 30,000 hits or 3. So it does tend to be sort of one extreme or the other when you're looking for these things. But in terms of actually finding repositories that are likely to contain material, we get a few clues from Wood's Guide itself. There are some entries and some lists in the back towards the end of the guide that mention other places where even they've thought that there might be Irish related material. And of course, you know, stories and work that predecessors have done over the last century have identified where material has ended up, particularly the American repositories. That's really quite well known. In other cases, it's kind of following trails and making educated guesses as far as we can. So in Australia, for example, one of the entries, some of the records that we know were in the PROI were related to the convict department of convict records. And so the originals have been lost, but of course, Australia was a major destination for a lot of the transportation. So that was then a matter of kind of targeting the major collections within Australian repositories and then identifying matching records. So it's kind of a combination of a bit of trial and error, but also working out from what we already know where we're likely to find things. And so far, we've been very fortunate, but it's always good to hear of more. So if you happen to know of some tiny repository in the back of nowhere that has something of interest, please do let us know. We're always open to those suggestions.
Yeah, and if people do know of things, obviously you want to get suggestions. You know, are you looking for more partners, or what? How can people get involved?
Yeah, I mean, we're always open to having more partners. The more the merrier. There are so many things that are out there, and it's wonderful not only to be able to use the materials and include them in the virtual treasury, but also to build the network of scholars that we're working with and to share the inherited knowledge that we have about these records and their various histories as well. So if there are repositories that are interested in being involved or know that they have materials, then by all means do reach out and get in touch. We'd love to hear from you and have a chat about how we might be able to work together.
Great. And Elizabeth, I was really fascinated by those kind of the medieval exchequer and these sort of scrolls of information, all the medieval material. Is there medieval material in other collections that will be added to the treasury?
There's a small collection of material at the British Library, which is mostly antiquarian things that have come in. There's some really exciting transcripts held by the Trinity College, Dublin, for the memoranda roles. And so and who knows, there may be lots more out there that we just haven't identified yet, that no one's gone, oh wait, that's actually Irish Exchequer, not English Exchequer, because the processes look quite similar. So I'm hopeful there's lots more out there, but we have quite a lot already.
And I mentioned at the beginning how it's culturally interesting, it's obviously archivally interesting, but there's this whole technological aspect. What are your backgrounds? Do you or do you leave the technological bits to someone else, or like how do you feel like you need to? My mind would be completely blown, I think, if I had to start to understand all that kind of digital piecing together of things. But I'm just interested to know how involved you get in that and how it works.
I worked for a big digital project during my PhD, the St. Stephen's Chapel reconstructions. So I already had worked alongside the tech teams, kind of in that translation process of, how do we take what we as historians or humanities people understand and turn it into something that they can then, that dialogue. So I had a bit of background with that, but it's been a very steep learning curve alongside the tech team, I think, for us, at least for me, getting, as we talk about, okay, we want this, how do we best do that? How do we, it's been a real collaboration. So I think it's fair to say that's true for all of us, isn't it?
I think so. I have a bit of a background in digital humanities. I came from a classics background originally and worked in 3D imaging with the Herculaneum papyri. And then more recently in digital mapping and some imaging with archives. But the type of technology that we're looking at, and of course Transcribus with Latin text and technology I'd done before. But a lot of the technology we're looking at in doing this, in creating these virtual models and building the database, and the really complex to me anyway, I think even to some of the tech people as well. But a lot of this infrastructure that's underpinning what we're doing, it really does require enormous expertise and creativity. And the colleagues we have in the Adapt Centre and who are working alongside us are fantastic. And it's been really great to work collaboratively with them to share how we look at archives from the historical perspective, and then how they look at what we're presenting to them in terms of data and things that they can present and pin together in a different way. So I think, I'm not sure that either one of us would be able to do it without the other in such a way. So it's been really exciting to work with them and see how we can work together.
Yeah, thank you. And what about the pandemic? Obviously, this is a digital project, but has it held you up, or have you had to work differently? What's the impact been?
There's been a few changes to the approach that we were taking, especially from the archival discovery side. There's been a lot of changing of how we thought we'd go about things, because obviously getting in to actually work through the archives and do fingertip searches and rummage through the boxes and so on was meant to be a big part of what we were doing, not only for myself in TNA, but for all the archival discovery fellows, who are working elsewhere. So not being able to get into the building has had an impact from that side of things. But really all it's done is change the way and the order in which we've been doing our research. So there's been a lot more catalogue investigation and a lot more background on the metadata, and really getting into what we know and pinpointing where we need to find things. I've been saying for the first time, when I finally get back into the archives, I'm going to be the most organized. I'll actually know what I need to see when I get in there on day one, instead of doing a last minute search. So I don't think it's held us up, but it's made us work in a different way. But we've still been able to find some great things.
You've got a hard deadline. That 100-year deadline's not going to move, is it? So yeah, you keep going.
We know what we're doing at this point, I think. And there's been a lot more. I think we've gone to digitization more quickly than we might have, working with people like the British Library Imaging Service or TNA's Imaging Service to say, yes, this is what we definitely need digitized, even if Sarah hasn't actually been able to see it. Or, from my side, we were always going to digitize the gold seams. So that was done. And then, we've just kind of kept going,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's a really, really inspiring project. I can't wait to see it come to fruition next year. So yeah, thanks, Sarah and Elizabeth. And we're going to move now to our second presentation. So this, the title of this one is From Outbreak to Archive. This is about a young person's project that had to go digital during the pandemic. And we're going to hear from Emily Morris and Rachel Hillman, who are in the education team at the National Archives, and from Nigel Kellaway, who's a freelance filmmaker. So yeah, the National Archives education team have been working with Nigel to run creative projects for young people. And in this presentation, they're going to talk about their most recent film project, which is called From Outbreak to Archive, and how they've had to adapt it to suit the circumstances of COVID-19. So I will hand over to the three of you. Thanks very much.
Okay, wonderful. Well, it's lovely to be here this afternoon. Thank you. We're really pleased to be presenting. As Emma Jane said, we come from the National Archives. My name's Rachel. I manage the on-site education team, and my colleague Emily, the Family and Young People's Programme Officer, is here this afternoon. And we're also with Nigel Kellaway, who is a professional filmmaker and a visual communications designer. And we're going to talk about our summer film project for young people that we ran in 2020, entitled From Outbreak to Archive. Now, originally, this was a creative project designed to be run in person at the National Archives, but it was adapted very quickly to be delivered entirely online. And we're going to tell you a little bit about the background to this project and other projects that came before, how we adapted our work in 2020 to work online, and how the creativity and the hard work of the young people involved, inspired by the archive documents, produced some truly unique and quite poignant films. So to set the scene, I'm going to play the short trailer we used to promote the premiere of the finished films last year. So I hope you enjoy. Well, hopefully that gave you a flavour of the project and a taster of some of the young people's work. So now I'd like to give you a bit more of a background actually to the young people's creative film projects that have come before this one. Because each year since 2016, we've been fortunate enough to run these film projects, inviting young people between the ages of 16 and 19 years to apply. The projects run for 5 days during the course of a week in the summer, and they have 4 very clear overarching aims. To make archives more accessible for young people, broadening the understanding of who archives are for and what they can achieve. We want young people to appreciate and know that archives are for them and are relevant for their lives. To provide opportunity for young people to work with original documents. The importance and impact of working with real records cannot be underestimated. To enable the young people to plan and animate a film about their interpretation of these records, and to support young people in developing new skills related to filmmaking and stop motion animation, to build confidence, meet like-minded new people, and to make new friends. Many of the young people taking part in these film projects have cited these as evidence of their extracurricular interests when applying for university and courses to develop their future careers. You can see on screen here, we've got scenes from some of the very different films that have come before From Outbreak to Archive. Some Tales, our very first film, all about soldiers who fought in the First World War, followed by Suffrage Tales, looking at records and stories related to the fight for female suffrage. Then Holding History, an overview of 1,000 years of documents within the National Archives collection. This one was quite an epic feat. And last year's Mental Health on Record film, looking at individual stories of mental health in the 19th and early 20th centuries as reflected in our records. Each year we host a showcase event at the end of the project. This has always been an opportunity to hear from the talented young people who took part, to view the original documents that have inspired each film's creation, and to celebrate the hard work and effort of all involved. In previous years, we have actually delivered the entire film project on site at the archives, with conference rooms being turned into film studios and art rooms. Here you can see the production of Mental Health on Record in full swing. But 2020 was different, and Emily and Nigel will explain just how different it was. It was also a wonderful opportunity because we were able to work in a completely new way with another immensely creative and talented group of young people. Lockdown, something that we initially saw as a barrier to delivering this film project, actually became an amazing way to pilot something new and to forge a very different way of working. So my colleagues will explain how, and I'm going to hand over to Emily.
Great, thank you, Rachel. So yes, as Rachel has said, last summer's project was quite different to our previous ones, but only really in form. At the very heart of it was the importance of the young people exploring archive documents and using their own interpretations to inspire their films. So we ran the project completely online with the education team, Nigel, and all of the young people connecting via daily Zoom calls, although they were lucky enough to have a lunch break away from the screen. We did give them that. We wanted to try and get that feeling of group work and the atmosphere of everyone together, although probably by the end of it, they were quite sick of our ongoing nattering and chatter between us. And as always, the Monday of the project week was spent taking part in document workshops where the young people were able to get to grips with their diseases, so to speak. The themes were the Great Plague, smallpox, cholera, Spanish flu, and the coughs and sneezes and AIDS public health campaigns. We split the group into 6 smaller groups of 2 to 3 in breakout rooms, and each were led by a member of the education team. We ran what we call our mystery document workshops, where we started to introduce them to the topics by showing images of the documents and gradually revealing what it was and its context through evidence gathering. As a team, we have lots of experience of running such online activities through our well-established schools online programme, which gave us the confidence to know that the young people would be able to engage with the digital images. And this was supported by materials on Google Classroom, which were available to all of the group. And it also really helped break the ice and give the young people an opportunity to feel familiar with a couple of others, as most of them hadn't met each other before. And the rest of the week was for filmmaking. So, mental health first aider John Bartlett joined us, and he ran a workshop discussing their experiences of lockdown and mental health too. And Nigel took what we'd done in previous years and reorganised it into steps which simplified the set building and filmmaking processes. The big switch was that the group had to use materials from home and to film with their smartphones, boosted by packs of art resources which we'd sent to them. And the daily timetable allowed each person to create and film a scene in one day before moving on to the next. And at the end of the week, the young people also recorded voiceovers for their films, which I think gives you a really great sense of their personalities and their interpretations, which I'd mentioned earlier. By Friday, well, I must say I was quite overcome and moved by the whole week. I hadn't really known what to expect when we started, but the group's enthusiasm and dedication and manner were just fantastic. And the young people were a real testament to themselves and their creativity. And the resulting series of films are poignant, funny, and informative. And if we have the time at the end of our presentation, I'd really like to play one of the films for you, which is about 4 minutes long. So I'm going to hand over to Nigel now, the filmmaker, to talk about the project from his perspective.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It was a very different project this year or last year, and part of, you know, just coping with the COVID situation really did sort of throw us for a little while. But what we found is, or what I found is, I needed to do lots of research into how best we were going to work. And so I tried out lots of different approaches, and realized that if we were going to get the young people to work and create from home, we needed to think very small. And so the smaller and smaller that they could work would be the best for them, because we didn't know how much space they would have at home. And the big decision that we really made was that we would let them use their smartphones for the work. And that meant that we had to start I had to start looking at how best to organize them so they could make the most of their smartphones. And that led me to very much creating a film myself, a demo film, which I could try all sorts of techniques and then break those techniques down into a making of film, so that during the week or on the first day, we could actually show them how they could possibly progress and how they could actually achieve really good images with their phones. Also, we really looked at how to simplify the scripting process so we could explain it very easily over Zoom, and then get them to do a scripting exercise on the first day. Because, I mean, what we've always found is the first day is the most important day to get them into the sort of project. We had lots of challenges, and part of that was, you know, would the Wi-Fi be okay? Different access abilities, and so I ran a test with 2 colleagues to see how a lot of these things would work. So I worked with them over Zoom over a week, and what I found is they sort of did. I found that I had so little control over what they were doing, and that actually one of my colleagues did do quite a lot of cheating, which sort of really helped me to understand how little control that we would actually have. And also, one of them had just recently moved house and they had very little space to working, so that very quickly helped me to understand how space would be used. Rachel, can you move to the next slide, please? We really wanted, I mean, the reason we sent out the resources to the students was we really wanted to create as level a playing field as possible. We knew that some students would have top of the range phones. We knew that some people might have like a phone that's like they'd got from a sibling or something. So we were really clear about, you know, we really wanted to give them all as many materials that they could each have the same thing. So we sent out paints and all sorts of things. There's only certain things you can really send out, but we sent out a good range of things. And actually it was really interesting because we used materials that are less messy, whereas we usually make an awful lot of mess at the archives, covering all you know, every surface so that we don't destroy things. But we allowed them to work in a much smaller way. It's really important to, what to say, welcome session, sorry. Okay, sorry, on the welcome session, sorry, I was reading my slide. So on the welcome session, we've always used that as a very good way to gauge the young people. And again, this was really important. We used that session much more, I think, on that day to sort of give them a sense of the archive, but also to test Wi-Fi, to see their skill set, and for them to actually become much more familiar with us, because it is not, you know, it is very different first meeting people on Zoom when you haven't met them in real life. I mean, we've worked together on these projects, so we actually know how, you know, we know each other quite well, but you know, they didn't know us, and so it's like allowing them to become familiar with us was a really important step on that day, and it did really help us. I mean, I've always felt that on those induction days, that when we look at what they've done on that day, it gives a really good indication of who might need extra support. But you know, throughout the week, we did realise that it is harder to support some students that need additional support. It is harder to support them, and we tried different strategies to do that. It's difficult because you don't want to just say to students, oh, let's take you off into a breakout room and and just have a chat, really, if you can help it. So we did a lot of checking in. We found that really helped the students to really sort of like tell us if they were struggling, or to actually feed back to us where they needed help. And we had a lot of showing of what they were doing in progress, which was really useful. It's really interesting to see how students would diverge from the brief. And some students just said, oh, I'm going to do it this way. And we had no control over that, really. But it was really interesting to see in what way they did go with those changes. And what has really helped us from this project is it's really helped us to see how we can actually run things in different ways. I mean, in lots of respects, last year, I think, was the biggest research project that the whole planet has actually done. We were all trying different ways of working, seeing what works for us all. And that opportunity doesn't come around very often. So it really helped us to sort of look at how we work, refresh how we work, and think about how we can actually use the skills which the young people really had, and in absolute abundance. They were they were incredibly creative with what they did. And we were quite shocked sometimes to see, they'd show us things, and it's like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And I think it's really useful for us to see different ways of working, and to actually, it's really helped us to see what we do and look at it differently. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. I just thought it might be helpful if I ran through a few of kind of our takeaways or challenges and benefits of moving online from our education team perspective. So as Nigel said, there was definitely more of a challenge in keeping track of the group and their progress. And we had to rely on them much more to kind of send their work in daily each day and ask questions. If you ask young people to send in work in each day, you may understand my experience there. Another challenge was working online the whole time and kind of trying to mitigate against Zoom and screen fatigue. So we would give them the choice to switch their cameras off whilst they worked independently, and everyone logged off for lunch hour, and the morning and afternoon sessions were just a couple of hours in length. And I think it really helped that the young people were kind of doing practical activities with their hands whilst they were on screen at the same time. But a good benefit was removing the barrier of location and travel. But I'd say a challenge in that respect is that it relied on the young people having a reliable internet connection and also a quiet space for them to work in. Some of them did and some of them didn't. But a good benefit was the greater geographical reach and the potential for that moving kind of the digital programme forward, really. So I can see it's about 10 minutes for the end. So I'm just going to take the liberty of showing you one of the films. It's about 4 minutes in length, but I think it will give you a really great idea of the project. So just bear with me whilst I share my screen. And these are all available on our website.
Excuse me?
Who? Me?
Yes, you. Do you want Hitler to win the war?
Of course not.
Well, by sneezing without a handkerchief, you might as well have handed him the keys to Buckingham Palace yourself.
Oh dear.
Did you know, last year the common cold cost the country 40 million days' work?
Really?
So, next time you need to sneeze, trap the germs in your handkerchief. Go on, give it a go.
Achoo! Oh, thank you, omniscient voice.
My pleasure. And remember, coughs and sneezes spread diseases.
During World War II, the Ministry of Information ran a public health campaign showing various short films and putting up posters that emphasised the importance of using a handkerchief when sneezing. The posters appeared in factories, schools and offices around Britain. These posters were often satirical in order to catch the public's attention, as you can see in this poster, which shows a man literally being lifted off the ground by a sneeze. This poster and many others were illustrated by Henry Mayo Bateman, a popular cartoonist of the time. The main slogan of the campaign was "Coughs and sneezes spread diseases." This originated from the USA during World War I to prevent the spread of the Spanish flu that was devastating the trenches at the time. It's catchy and memorable, which is why it has been used for the coronavirus pandemic. Another phrase used was "help to keep the nation fighting fit." During World War II, emphasis was placed on a national effort. The target audience for the posters were for the workforce at home, and the aim was to minimise the amount of people taking days off work because they were ill. This campaign is indicative of a growing intervention in public health by the government. At the turn of the century, they started to get more involved, with similar campaigns in the 1930s against venereal diseases and diphtheria. This led to the Beveridge Report in 1942 and the establishment of the NHS in 1948. Like most propaganda during World War II, an emphasis was placed on the national effort. There were similar campaigns encouraging people to grow their own vegetables to do their bit for the war. This created a sense of national unity, which can also be said for the coronavirus pandemic. When my A-levels were cancelled, I wanted to follow in the footsteps of my great aunt, who worked at a factory making planes for the war, so I got a job making ventilators for the NHS. Posters and short films have also been a big part of the effort to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Slogans are still key to catching the public's attention. In the 1940s, my great aunt did her bit by using a handkerchief, and I'll do mine by washing my hands and wearing a mask.
Okay, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. That was a film by Emma Louise. You can see she's kind of used a great use of her own kind of experiences of the lockdown, as well as the records from the archives as well. So yeah, we'd like to invite any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, all of you. Really inspiring. I've seen some of the films before, but it was really lovely to hear about the sort of genesis of them and the process in putting them together. Yeah, I'm sure it throws up a lot of questions. I know I've got tons. There are some in the chat, so I'll start with those. A lot of people saying how inspired they are by them. So we've got a question from Katie Goodwin saying, how were the young people recruited? How did you choose who got to take part?
So we ran it in the same way that we usually run our recruitment. So we create an advert and kind of space on our website with all of the information about the project. And then it's really just a case of like promotion. We share it with all of our schools contacts through our teaching program. So kind of upper Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 students. We share via professional networks. So there's a young people's programming network, so we can share things on there, and via our social media too, and any other colleagues really who we think will be interested. I know Nigel shares via his contacts too, so it's really just a case of getting it out there and hoping that it lands. And we invite the young people to write a 100-word application on why they're interested, and from that you can really usually gauge their kind of interest in it, be it the history side of it or the filmmaking side of it, or both. And yeah, that's how we recruit them.
Thank you. There's a comment about, and I know this has been a really prevalent discussion in schools about digital poverty and how this home learning obviously is dependent on people having access to equipment. And so how did you in your project sort of mitigate that? It sounds like they were able to do it on the lowest tech things that they might have available. Like, was that a discussion you had, and how did you try and remedy that?
Sorry, Nigel, yeah, you go.
Sorry. I mean, I tested out the whole project on the lowest spec phone I could find, and actually to see whether it would actually be a viable option. And also, I mean, at the time, I thought maybe we might have to send a few students phones to use. That was an option, and we did send out. We sent glue, we sent paints, we sent paintbrushes, we sent paper, and we did a checklist to see what people would like. So we were very, very conscious of that. Really, really conscious. And we had lots of strategies that we thought, if we need to do this, we will do this to make sure it was really, really, topmost in our minds when we started the project.
Yeah. I'm really interested in the comment one of you made about having less control, and I think all of us as educators, we plan our programs and we think, well, on day one they're going to do this, and day two and there'll be a process, and by the end we'll have this result. What did relinquishing that control teach you, and has it taught you anything for the future that you might take on board, or will you be pleased to have control back when we can do things in person?
I think
I don't know if you want to say. No, Rachel, go on, you say something.
No. I was just going to say, I think it's actually made us feel that we can give more control over to the young people. Actually, we really want to take more of a sort of young person-led approach. I think that's something we've taken away from this and we've learned. And they are so creative and so inspiring. And I think because they did take more ownership, I think the films, what they have created at the end, are so much more, what's the word I'm looking for? They're just so much more inspiring, what they've created at the end, because they've put more of themselves into this work, and they've brought more of their own lived experiences, I guess, this year. So I think that's what we've taken from it. We will take that forward. We will allow them to have more ownership moving forward. Sorry, Nigel, over to you.
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, I completely, that's exactly what I was going to say, really. I mean, the one thing that we're always worried about is copyright. That's the biggie with these projects, to make sure that people don't use things that saying, oh my goodness, you've used that and we can't have that because we can't now use that on our website. And there was a couple of things that we had to sort of like just say, oh no, please don't do that. But really, they just created films, and some people went all the way through every process, making their own music. It really depends on their individual skill sets.
And I was also interested in the comment about you had a mental health first aider at the moment. We've all, and particularly young people, well, everybody, but I sort of feel for young people at the moment, and and I think that this idea about, they're not just doing a project, but, they're in an environment that's completely different. They might be finding life a bit difficult. That adds a whole different dimension to the project. And I'm just interested to know a little bit more about that. Obviously, I don't want you to disclose anything that anyone might have said to you, but this idea of having a mental health first aider is really interesting.
Yeah, so we've worked with John in our previous project, Mental Health on Record, and we just thought, because of the circumstances, obviously, and also the material they were working with, obviously none of it was like graphic, but there are kind of references to deaths and symptoms and things like that, and so you just thought, you don't know their circumstances or what's happened, so just to give them the kind of space and a professional person who isn't us, who aren't the facilitators, to have a chance to have a discussion, and kind of just have that guidance and that signposting, we thought would be a really important aspect of it. And it was optional, they didn't have to do it, but some of them did, and I sort of sat in the session as a sort of safeguarding thing, but they were really open about their experiences of it. And so I think for those who took part, I think they seemed to really engage with it and find it helpful, and just kind of that common experience of young people kind of going through that. They were all saying very similar things. So, and one of the things a lot of them said in the feedback was that they'd really enjoyed meeting new people and doing something creative with their hands, which is something they usually say after the projects, actually. So we kind of had that mental health kind of safeguarding and guidance thing, but also we kind of hoped that the creativity and the expression from the project would be a kind of a good for them, a balm, I suppose, so to speak. Exactly.
I think someone called Sam would like to ask a question, so I'm just going to see if that appears in the Q&A. But while we wait for that, just to sort of on a celebratory note, how did you showcase or celebrate the project when you got to the end?
Oh, Rachel, you go. I've spoken loads. We had because we couldn't have an on-site premiere this year. We had an online premiere, actually. So we invited all of the young people. They were able to then invite friends and family. So they all joined via Zoom as well, and we showcased over the course of a week.
we sent out a couple of films each day via email to everyone who was attending the premiere, so they could watch them in their own time. And then on the night of the premiere, we brought everybody together and we just really celebrated the young people's work. We got some of the young people to talk about their experiences of the week. And yeah, we talked about the website that was going to be produced and where all of their work would be showcased and shown afterwards. So yes, it was just a real celebration of their hard work, really, and what they'd come through and done. And Nigel's brilliantly just showcasing the beautiful booklet that was produced, that Emily and Nigel produced, and it had a page dedicated to each young person in their film, and that was sent out to each of the young people, and they received that on the night of the premiere, and they got to open that as well. So normally we produce a DVD, but this year it was a little bit different.